Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos a otra sesión más de Charlas Terránea. Les agradecemos su presencia el día de hoy, gracias por continuar con nosotros. En esta 16ª edición contamos con la presencia de Clare Whitney del equipo de Clayworks. Ella ha trabajado de la mano de los fundadores de Clayworks, Katie Price y Adam Weissman, desde sus inicios en el 2003 construyendo con COP. Continúa su trayectoria con Katie y Adam hasta convertirse en especialistas en aplanados de arcilla para posteriormente lanzar sus propios aplanados de alta calidad, listos para mezclarse en el 2010. Ha formado parte del equipo de Clayworks Aplanados de Arcilla, llevándolos a todos los rincones del mundo, estableciendo colaboraciones interesantes con arquitectos, diseñadores y marcas líderes en sus respectivos mercados. I'm gonna make the introduction in English today too. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Terránea Talk session. We're glad to have you all here with us today. Today, we're glad to have with us Clare Whitney from Clayworks. Clare has worked with the founders of Clayworks, Katie Price and Adam Weissman, since 2003, when the company was building cup buildings and was known as Cup in Cornwall. She has worked alongside Katie and Adam as they became specialists in clay plasters, launching their own brand of highly researched and tested ready-to-mix clay plasters in 2010. Clare has supported the company and been part of a team that has taken Clayworks clay plasters to all the corners of the globe, establishing collaborative relationships with some of the world's leading architects, designers, and brands. Antes de cederle la palabra, les comentamos que al finalizar de la charla tendremos un espacio de preguntas y respuestas. Les pedimos que nos hagan llegar sus preguntas por el chat. Y agradecemos a Calidra por apoyar en estas charlas. Sin nada más que agregar, les cedo la palabra a Clare. Before we begin, I'm just going to tell you that we have a session of questions at the end of the talk. And with nothing else to say, Clare, the word is all yours.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Terránea, for inviting me. I feel very honoured, and thank you, everybody, for coming. Apologies that my Spanish is no good at all. So hopefully you can all hear me and understand my English. I'll try and speak as clearly as I can. I'm just going to share the screen, and hopefully you can see that. Can everybody see that? Can you see that slide? Yes, the screen share. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just I'm going to turn my video off so that I don't put my myself off. So thank you everybody for coming today, and thank you, as I said, for inviting me. I'm very honored. So Clayworks is now the leading manufacturer and supplier of clay plasters in the world. We were launched in 2010. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we came to be in this situation right now, and hopefully where we hope to go in the near future. So I'm calling you from Cornwall, and we are down in the very, very far southwest tip of England. So we're about a 5-hour drive from London. We're fairly remote. We're in a little peninsula that sticks out into the North Atlantic Sea. Right now it's 5 o'clock here, 5 o'clock in the evening. It's dark. It's blowing. It's raining, and it's very typical for Cornwall of this weather. This is sort of where we're located, just inland from here. So this is the team, and some of the team taking a lunch break. This is where we go for our lunch. The telephone is the picture from our office. So we're just inland. We're surrounded by nature reserve and wild ponies. We're very lucky. We're in a very beautiful part of the world. So I'm going to just sort of run through the history of clay plasters. I'm going to talk about the different finishes, the different textures and aesthetics. I'm going to talk a little bit about the healthy aspects of clay plasters, a little bit about the sustainability aspects, and then also some of the practicalities of how clay plasters work and how they're applied. So the company was founded by Adam Wiseman and Katie Bryce, a young couple that met were working in London, and they were actually working in a natural food store. They have a sort of deep shared love of all things natural and all things about nature. Neither of them had a background in building, in fact, but they moved to Cornwall and they developed a fascination with ancient building techniques and decided to build their own buildings, their own cob buildings. So they were very, very influenced by this book, Shelter. I don't know if anybody is familiar with this. It's been around for maybe 40 years, and it's still a sort of Bible about building with raw, natural materials, and natural materials that are local to an area, vernacular architecture. And they were heavily influenced by this, and became sort of obsessed with natural building where there weren't endless cycles of processing, additives, transformation, generation of waste. They wanted to go back to raw building materials. So they started a company called Cob in Cornwall, and this is one of the projects they worked on. Adam and Katie led the company. They had a team of people. They did a lot of work for His Royal Highness the Prince of Charles, the Queen's son. He has a lot of land in Cornwall and in Scotland, and they built these structures using just wood, straw, and earth. And their real focus on raw natural materials. It sort of developed the idea that the respect for natural living, unprocessed goods was everything that connected everything that they did, and sort of was a thread that went through all of the materials and all of the building they did. They traveled the world at that stage, researching vernacular architecture, ancient building techniques, and became so sort of addicted to the idea of natural building that they wrote a book. So this was a book in 2003, Building with Cob. It's still in publication. It's still a bit of a Bible. Cob is an earth building technique, and that was launched. When you build with cob buildings, the exterior tends to be finished with a lime finish, and the interior with a clay finish. And so, while researching this book, building cob buildings, sort of became more and more obsessed with clay and also lime. So they wrote another book, this time about clay and lime renders. And it was at this sort of stage around 2006 that they really started to discover the true potential of clay, a material that could solve so many problems. They sort of discovered the infinite beauty, the functionality of clay. But of course, clay was mainly at that time dug up on site, applied on site. They were traveling around the world. They were going to sites. They were digging it up, and it was back-breaking work. And obviously, it couldn't be scaled. You could only have clay that was available on site. There were a couple of commercial manufacturers, but they were having difficulty getting clay to be used at scale. So at that stage, when they sort of realized that earthen materials could be a vital tool to tackling the challenges of our time, they sort of set out on a mission to capture this knowledge, to capture the knowledge of making clay plasters with the idea of making them available to everybody, making them available to people all over the world, in cities, in rural areas, everywhere. And to break down some of the barriers to clay where people were worried about cracking, about application. They knew that they had to find a clay plaster that could be easy to use, that was really consistent, that was reliable, dependable, could stand the test of time, that wouldn't crack, and that the plasterers would use. About that time, when they had a little old website called Cobbing Cornwall, somehow a chap called Nando Duarte, who's the founder of Nando's restaurant chain, from somewhere in Africa, he discovered Cobbing Cornwall, all the way from Africa, and looked at the clay plasters, and wanted to use Clayworks clay plasters, we weren't Clayworks at that time, on one of his restaurants. And this is the first ever sort of commercial project that we did. We're still in Cobbing Cornwall. This was still clay that was dug up from site and applied to this restaurant in Birmingham. And this sort of convinced us that we had to bottle this knowledge. We had to create something. We therefore sort of came out of the field, and we spent pretty much 3 years looking at clay plasters, meticulously sourcing materials, and trying to find formulas that would work. The thing about clay is that it's not one material, it's hundreds if not thousands of different materials. Clay as a binder is mixed with different aggregates, different sands. So we researched literally thousands of different materials, most of them from England, but all of the different geochemical makeups, to try and find a formula and to create this plaster that could come in a bag and be just ready to mix and ready to use, and one that would be acceptable to plasterers. And plasterers historically were very nervous of clay plasters. There's a lot to get wrong, and they dust and they crack, and they weren't keen on using them. And we had to break down that barrier, so we had to make it agreeable for those plasterers. So we launched our first plasters in 2010. It's one of those things where you sort of felt we were never ready, but we had to just go with it. At that time, they were still fairly rustic, and they were still sort of mainly earthen colours. But we did do more and more Nando's. We did more Nando's restaurants around the world. We started to do different other restaurants. They discovered us for clay's ability to create these finishes. This is actually a Nando's in Singapore, and this sort of spurred us on. And in 2011, we decided to enter this big design award competition. So this is it's an international design award, the FX International Design Awards, and we won. And we won because of the way clay looked, and also because it was sustainable and healthy. And that sort of catapulted us, if you like, onto the radar of architects and designers. And another little break we had was sorry, I'm just going to come back. Yeah, at the time we were also researching colors. We realized that we had to get away from the normal, just plain earth colors, the sort of the mud hut colors, that association with mud huts. And we started researching pigments, different colors from all around the world, working with different colors, creating our pigments, creating different colors. And we initially launched 27 colors, and kept on researching development. We now have 86 different colors, standard colors. And color is a sort of big thing for us, and always researching that. We have a whole team down here in Cornwall constantly working with color and texture to try and make clay plaster a contemporary wall finish, to make it acceptable, to move it away from sort of age-old perceptions of how clay plaster is, because we should never forget it's the oldest wall finish in the world. It's been around since cave days. So We then had another lucky break where an architect called Simon Astridge, who's a very discerning architect in England, discovered us and decided to build a house in London. He called it the Clay House, and he filled it with clay plasters. And by this time, we'd sort of developed a much finer, much smoother finish, much more luxurious finish. And he put this in this house, and it became very, very high profile. It was in design magazines all over the world, and it's still known as the Clay House. And this sort of gave us a reputation then for our smooth finishes. And these have ironically become our most popular finishes now. This is another example of our smooth finish. It's a very fine, it's all 100% clay, 100% natural pigments. You can see that it has a slightly sort of non-homogeneous color and texture, that sort of wabi-sabi, slightly imperfect, beautiful, raw earth, natural feel to it. And we then started getting, it's more smooth, we then started getting calls from architects and designers who wanted to create specialist finishes. So this is an example. This was Alexander McQueen, and the world famous designer. They took over an old property in the east of London, very, very old, and it had some of this old shuttered concrete, and you can see a picture there on the left. And they sent us this picture and said they wanted to recreate that finish throughout the store. So we got to work, and we created a clay plaster sample, the middle picture, and then it went throughout the store. You can see the pictures on the right, and we sort of became known. We developed a reputation there for creating concrete aesthetics without the toxins, the poisons, and the carbon footprint of concrete. There's a picture of the store, and these were all sort of small gains, I would say, for clay plaster as it moved from being an ancient material into a contemporary material. And from there, we created a polished concrete effect, and a sort of a raw concrete. We created other textures as well. So I don't know how familiar you are with clay plasters, but because it's a raw material, it doesn't set, it doesn't change its state like a lime plaster would. So it can hold very, very sharp edges and three-dimensional sculptures. And we developed techniques for layering plasters, one on top of the other, and then carving back, so that you could create these 3D patterns that were very coveted by restaurants and people looking for very distinctive branding. We started to see more of a demand from luxury homes, people who were looking for healthy materials. This is a sort of what we call our demi-rustic finish. So this is in between our smooth and our rustic. And we started to be able to create more effects by looking at different aggregates and creating lots and lots of different finishes, applying the clay for these sort of carved interiors like this. This is the picture on the right is the Mercedes-Benz showroom in Hong Kong. And a little bit more concrete that's been used a lot in retail now. And I'm just flicking through these pictures to show what is possible. We can replicate historical building finishes. A lot of people looking for sort of ancient Italian looking plaster finishes. We create these all custom. And we can create these very non-homogeneous finishes by mixing different textures. So our smooth finishes, our demi-rustics, our rustics, they're all totally different formulations. They're not just techniques with trowels. They are totally different materials made up with different formulas. So here we can mix them to create a sort of smooth and rough finish. And it's a great finish for very large areas because it's non-homogeneous. It's not monotonous. You can also see here that we can be used in ceilings, and that we can create finishes to match other finishes, floor finishes, stairs, that sort of thing. So clay plasters are great for walls and ceilings. We don't do floors, we don't do stairways. We do exterior finishes to match. So to the left of the glass there, that's an exterior finish that we created. It's designed to match our clay, but it's not 100% clay there. So we continued working with designers around the world, creating a lot of different, very distinctive and very carved finishes, a lot of branding, a lot of murals, wall finishes, 3D wall finishes. And then we were asked to create a finish to replicate rammed earth. And it wasn't something we thought of initially, but we were asked to create it because rammed earth, I'm sure you're familiar with the technique. It's a very it's becoming more and more fashionable, but in city centres and things, it's not practical because of the weight of the earth and the movement of material. So because clay plasters are raw, they're raw earth, they lend themselves to creating that effect. So so we spent a couple of years sort of working on how to do this, and we've launched our rammed earth finishes now as a separate sort of brand, if you like, and they're being used around the world again for restaurants, for interiors. This is designed to look like a monolithic stone finish, using that's all clay. Looks like stone, but it's all clay. So so we've sort of been, this is our journey, I guess, is creating these custom finishes as well as the smooth finishes. And we get used for a lot of sign writing, wayfinding, pictures. This is a whole storytelling in a restaurant. We also can incorporate straw into our finishes. Adam spent some time in Japan studying, and in Japan they use a lot of straw in their finishes. It has some advantages. It does actually increase the moisture buffering potential of clay. It has certain other advantages with strength as well. So we like to use it. We're using different straws. We're using hemp straws more and more now that are grown locally. So this is an example of our straw finish. This was actually a restaurant we did in Dubai with a straw Arakabi finish. Again, we can do a very heavy straw to very light straw, and this is a famous building in London done by a famous architect using our black straw. And lots of different aggregates to create lots and lots of different finishes there. And we work collaboratively with architects. So people send us pictures, they send us ideas, we create these finishes for them. So these have all been created for architects for different projects around the world. Lots of different textures again. I'm just racing through these. This shows a different way of using non-homogeneous textures by fading them. So you create a sort of rough to a smooth faded texture, and that was what you saw in the Aesop picture at the beginning of this presentation. Lots of carvings and sort of corduroy finishes, and all of these sorts of things. So I'm just literally racing through them because there's so many different things here. They're all on our website if anybody wanted to have a look. Tamped earth was developed to replicate an earth floor. So earthen floors are called tamped earth floors. While we don't do them, we have created a wall finish to replicate them. And then some more sort of moon style type finishes and thrown earth finishes as well. So that was a sort of a very quick run through of all of the different aesthetics. We sort of discovered along the way that clay is really, really healthy. It's very sustainable. So we sort of see that we sit on 4 pillars, and apart from the aesthetic, we have the health and well-being. And the health of the clay plasters it's not only the fact that we don't have, because they're all natural, there are no volatile organic compounds there. There's no synthetics, no toxins. They don't off-gas any materials. There's no formaldehydes, no metals, no leads, no asbestos, obviously, no PCBs. No flame retardants. Clay plasters are naturally fire retardant, although we do have official certificates. So there's nothing in them that's not pure and natural. There's nothing that's going to put anything into the air that you don't want. But it's kind of more complicated than that, because clay absorbs water, it absorbs moisture from the air. And if any of you have worked with ceramics and raw clay, you'll know that when clay's in its raw form and you put water on it, it's very quickly absorbed. But clay also releases the moisture back. So if the clay plaster becomes more moist than the air, it will release it back into the air. So there's this constant sort of taking up of water and releasing of water back into the air. And the way clay does that is it's actually very geoscientifically different to other soil particles, very different to gravel and sand. You can see in this chart that it's much smaller, but more than that, it's a different shape. It's not made up of round particle. It's made up of these platelets. And part of our research over those years and ongoing is to research these platelets that can absorb the most water between the platelets before they crack. So when other materials absorb water, because of the circular nature of the particles, they will crack. But clay just absorbs within these particles and doesn't crack if you get it right. So the net result there is that clay will take up water, release water, and it will maintain the interior air quality at between about 40 and 60%. And this is a very, very critical level, 40 to 60%. Hold that thought, because this is the moisture level at which majority of adverse health effects are kept at bay. And you can see from this chart that the only material that's more breathable than clay is the longitudinal wood. So it's wood that is it's the end of the wood when you cut it. So that 40–60%, this is the moisture level at which there's a significant reduction in any airborne bacteria. There's also the critical level at which microbes and molds struggle to grow. It also, that level reduces formaldehyde in the air, and it helps asthma. And this is this diagram here that's been done by the H House in Germany. My source has slipped off the screen there. So this is H House done in Germany. So you can see in this chart that 40 to 60% level in the middle there, going down the middle. And anything below that or above that level leads to an increase in bacteria, also leads to an increase in viruses, very topical at this time. Moist air leads to an increase in fungi and mold spores, which we know to be toxic. And it's also, moist air leads to the more mites, dust mites, and it's the dust mite feces that leads to asthma. And dry air leads to respiratory infections and more allergies, and also dry air leads to more ozone production, and it's the ozone that leads to formaldehyde in the air. So this is all on our website. I'm not going to go through it right now, but this just gives more substance to what I've just been saying. And there has been a whole book written about housing and asthma by a Scottish scientist, where he talks about the importance of keeping indoor air humidity at that critical level to reduce asthma, particularly in children. The 40 to 60% idea is gathering traction. There's actually a campaign now by Harvard scientists. So this is the infection control consultant at Harvard Medical School, who's leading a campaign to try and get buildings to all meet this critical moisture level. And I'm not sure how important it is in Mexico. It's obviously really important in places like England, where we have so much rain, and we also have very airtight buildings. So this is a big problem for us in England and in parts of America, many parts of the world. So another benefit is, because it works to reduce the ozone, if you reduce the ozone, clay plasters actually help to reduce formaldehyde. So they not only don't have formaldehyde, but clay plasters will act to reduce formaldehyde that is given off by other materials, such as cleaning products or furnishings, that sort of thing. So all in all, it's a pretty healthy product. It also helps to reduce sound, so it creates a calmer environment. It reduces glare. And the net result is that you end up in an environment that's altogether not just good for physical health, but also good for mental health. But also that's quite important in the workplace as well as bedrooms. So all these sorts of things really help with certificates. I think where you are, you probably, I don't know if you use LEED. We have a version called BREEAM, but it's very similar to the LEED certification. You probably have a Mexican version, but we tick a lot of boxes in these healthy buildings certifications. We also tick a lot of boxes for sustainability. So clay plasters are well known to have one of the lowest embodied carbon footprints of any interior finishes. And I'm just going to talk you through very quickly why that is. For anybody who's unfamiliar with carbon, there are different types of carbon that get used in buildings around the world. Contribute 40% of all of the carbon emissions in the world, and they do this by building up upfront carbon, and that is all of the emissions that come from from extraction of the raw materials, to the transport, to the manufacturing, to the packaging, the fabrication, to the transport, and through to the end of life. So it's the entire life cycle of a material. And the energy efficiency is the operational efficiency of a building. So that's the energy that it uses. So where we mainly contribute is the upfront embedded carbon. This is a diagram that we use, borrowed from Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, where they do a very good job of spelling out how on the top right hand that corner there, this is the cycle of carbon. So the extraction, as I said, the transport, the manufacturing, transport to site, the construction process, the use of water, energy, all of those sorts of things on the site, and then the eventual disposal. And for clay plasters, because we're raw materials, there's there is some energy in the extraction and transport, but there's no energy in the actual manufacturing because they're simply blends. We have no additives, and there's no heat used. There's very little energy. We use no water, so we have no pollution. We have no waste. All of the materials that we use can go back into the ground. The packaging we use is compostable. And at the end of the life of clay plasters, it can go back into the ground as well, assuming it's on a backing board that is compostable. So so consequently, we can help to save a huge amount of carbon. This diagram shows a conventional wall build-up of gypsum plaster and then paint, and compared to a clay plaster that's naturally pigmented, so it doesn't need paint. And this shows that in very general terms, you can save up to 2.4 kilograms per meter squared by using clay plasters rather than by using gypsum and paint. This is a database. I'm going to try not to bore you with this too much, but this shows the magic number that the carbon emission for paint is 2.9 to 3.75, so around 3, just hold that number. Whereas clay, we've just had an environmental product declaration, we're 0.04 for our smooth and for our rustic, and 0.06. So many percentage points less than paint and also gypsum plaster. So this is a chart that we borrowed from Carol Atkinson, where she shows the comparisons here. It's just a comparison of us with lime. So clay plaster compared to lime, far more sustainable, because lime has quite a complicated extraction process and manufacturing process. And here again, we're fourth up from the bottom, compared the embodied energy to gypsum plaster and paint. Again, we're far less as a clay plaster. I need to say at this point that we've just done this EPD. This is the gold standard, really, environmental product declaration, the gold standard of certification. It's recognized worldwide. I hope it is in Mexico as well. It definitely is in America, and increasingly being asked for by authorities. So this actually certifies that with our numbers at this low level, we have a lower number than when these charts were produced several years ago, 2008 in this stage, where they made assumptions about the embodied energy of clay plaster. So because we use very little energy and we use all natural power and natural light, we're actually lower than this. So we've got to redo all of these charts now. So we're pretty proud of our environmental performance. As I said earlier, clay plasters don't burn. This is a globally recognized certificate to show that clay plasters don't burn. Fire is a big issue in England right now, and everybody is very concerned about fire. So the way we work is we develop these new finishes all the time. We send out samples to architects. Sometimes they send us pictures, sometimes they just order samples. We send them out all over the world. from our premises here in Cornwall. This is where we stack and store and send out all of our different samples. So these are going out everywhere, and then we ship the material directly to site as well in those brown paper bags. So we don't use distributors or anybody because so many of our finishes are custom, that everything goes directly from our premises to site. Usually the architects are very involved, of course, but they don't, the material doesn't go via them. So this is our humble abode in Cornwall. And where we are now, we're focused on innovation. We're really focused on innovation now. We're really focused on delving very deep into making clay plasters more and more acceptable as a replacement to other less healthy and less sustainable finishes. So we're experimenting with new materials. This is hemp. I mentioned hemp. Hemp can increase the moisture buffering potential of clay plasters. It can do it can do other things as well, as I mentioned. We're also looking at some other novel ingredients, and we've been working on trying to increase the strength and durability of our clay plasters, and we've increased those 20% this year by including new natural materials. We're very much committed to our principles, all natural, but we are committed now to a program of research, development and testing. We've got several materials going for testing next week into acoustics. We need more acoustic data. We're getting more relative humidity data. We've got our EPD. We're getting various other certifications. So we're trying to make it not only easier for the market to accept, but for architects to specify. Architects have to meet a lot of sort of data accreditations now, and tick a lot of boxes, certainly in this country. So so with this focus on innovation, this is what we're doing right now. We've had an interesting year. We've seen a big increase in inquiries for healthy buildings. You know, for most of the last 10 years, people have been interested in clay plasters because of the way they look, the way they feel, that sort of real sensory experience. But now people are really waking up to the health potential for obvious reasons this year, and of course the sustainability credentials of clay. So that's where we are right now. A lot of testing, a lot of trials, a lot of secret ingredients that I can't divulge at this stage, but hopefully we'll release more. So we just want to make the product better and better and better. We work collaboratively with architects, as I say. We're always looking for feedback. We have a team of 3 who are just relentlessly focused now on R&D down here in Cornwall. So that's pretty much where we're at. And I'm just going to stop sharing now. So I'm going to come back onto my screen and share my video so that I can see you. So yes, that's how we started and where we've got to, and we don't know where we're going in the future, but I hope you could all hear that. I hope you could understand that, and be really open to any feedback, any questions, anything you've got to say.
Thank you so much, Claire. This is really, really interesting. Claire, thank you so much again for giving a little bit of your time and sharing with us this information. That's really interesting. I don't know if you have any comments or something else you might add.
No, I'm I'm really pleased to have been invited. I'm very honoured to be invited, and there's lots of names on the screen, but I don't know who I'm talking to. But if if anybody wants more information or wants to have another chat with me, my name's on the website, on the contacts page of the website. Feel free to email me or contact me, or I'll be having further conversations with Terenea, so feel free to contact Terenea as well about clay plasters. And I think, my only comment is Mexico is one of the few countries that we don't have a project in. So in fact, the whole of Latin America, we haven't done anything in Central or South America. So it would be really exciting to sort of do something there. And we followed some of the earth building projects, and we use a photographer, a professional photographer called Edmund Sumner, and he goes to Mexico a lot. So it'd be really exciting to join all of these dots and sort of do something in Mexico. And we'd love to work with any of you guys to see how we could make that happen.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, and we're excited to see what's coming along the way. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone else. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos el día de hoy. De nueva cuenta, se les agradece y estén al pendiente de nuestras redes sociales para más información. Y esta charla les comentamos que la estaremos subiendo a nuestro canal de YouTube. Muchas gracias, que tengan un buen día. Goodbye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Gracias.